The Week in Review with David Davis. Welcome to this week's video. It's been quite a busy week, as you all know already. It started, of course, with the huge debate on Boris Johnson and whether or not he'd misled the House. Now, the truth of the matter is, quite a lot of people in the House will already have come to a view on this, having watched Boris at work over the course of a year or two or longer. And indeed, I came to a view on this famously rather over a year ago when I called for him to go. But it's very, very important that the House of Commons is not deceived or lied to, not misled by ministers. It absolutely runs on that. If ministers are allowed to lie to the House, then the whole process of government, the whole process of our democracy fails. So it's very important that this debate happened, very important that the committee presented its report. And it did so and found that Boris had misled the House knowingly several times. So that was what the debate was about. The counter-argument put by some of his friends was that he didn't know or that we couldn't know his intentions. Well, if you read the report, which is long, 30,000 words, that's not terribly plausible. So the committee came to its view. It imposed penalties which sort of became irrelevant, really. It imposed 90 days. It was going to be 40 days, we think. It imposed 90 days because there were so many attacks on a committee attempting to intimidate them. The truth is, Boris resigned the moment he saw the report and called it a witch hunt, which it wasn't. Called it a kangaroo court, which it was not. So that's where the argument was. One of the things which was very concerning to me was that there were threats from some of Boris's supporters to deselect, to try and get people deselected as candidates for the next election if they voted to censure Boris. And that, to me, was very clearly, I mean, I read Erskine May, which is the sort of Bible of procedure in House of Commons, as to whether that was a contempt. It was clear to me that it was. I raised that in House, and I also made the point that anybody who tried to carry out a deselection would also be guilty of a contempt of the House and could be summoned to the House to apologise, for example. And I made that point in a point of order right at the beginning of the debate.
Another point of order, David Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to seek your guidance on two issues of potential contempt. Last Friday, the Daily Telegraph published the headline, "Johnson allies vow to oust MPs who vote for his censure." In accordance with sections 1514 and 1516 of Erskine May, these attempts to influence members voting on a quasi-judicial finding of this House seem to me to be a prima facie issue of contempt. So may I seek your guidance on whether I'm correct on this point, and perhaps even more importantly, whether any attempt to carry out such a threat to deselect a member based on their votes in today's debate would in itself be a contempt of this House?
Can I first of all say I thank the honourable gentleman for notes of his point of order. The proper course for raising a matter of privilege is to write to me privately, but I note the committee has indicated it will report further on the pressures placed on its members. As I have said before, the House referred this matter to the committee and members. They should always respect that.
One of the other issues that came up this week was the whole question of stop and search. And the Home Secretary had a rather unusual statement. In essence, she made a statement saying she encouraged the police to use stop and search. I was concerned that while stop and search is an important weapon of the police, it's got to be used properly. And when this issue came up in one of the policing bills earlier, in fact the public order bill, it was the day the Casey report came out saying there was a need for a reset of the way the police used, particularly the Metropolitan Police, use stop and search. And I cited those recommendations and suggested that we should still adhere to them, as you'll see in this clip.
David Davis.
Everybody in the House will share the Home Secretary's laudable aims of cutting knife crime. But she will remember that when we debated the new stop and search powers, I think it was the day after the Casey report came out, and I cited some examples from that report. I found examples where police officers had justified carrying out a search based on a person's ethnicity alone, had been rude or uncivil while carrying out the search and had used excessive force, leaving people, often young people, humiliated, distressed, and this damaged trust in the Met. And Casey called for a fundamental reset of the Met's use of stop and search powers. Now, at the time, I took it that the Home Secretary agreed with the Casey report. So can she tell the House how what she's proposing today, which may have considerable merit, takes on board that reset? How has she absorbed that reset into what she's doing today?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for his question. What we are, this government and indeed myself, we fully support the police in the fair use of stop and search to crack down on violent crime and to protect communities, because every knife taken off our streets is a potential life saved. That is the value that stop and search brings to fighting crime. The announcement that I'm making today brings together a series of measures whereby there will be an obligation to include more reporting and a greater increase on the data. That's something that's been commented on by previous inspectors and reports, so that we have a clearer picture of its use and its efficacy. There'll be guidance issued by the College of Policing, but already we have seen an improvement in accountability, an improvement in scrutiny, and as a result, a fall in the number of complaints.
Prime Minister's questions this week, I raised an issue which is not on the front page of the newspapers, but incredibly important. Generally speaking, it is a crime to help the Iranian state with military technology or dual use technology. And it had come to my attention that through some write-ups I saw in one of the papers, that this had been happening with British universities cooperating with Iranian universities on serious weapons technology. I raised it with the matter with the Prime Minister, and he gave a very robust response.
Mr. Speaker, the United Kingdom sanctioned Iran for promoting terrorism, for destabilising the Middle East, for supplying weapons to our enemies, and of course the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Within the past few weeks, the journalist David Rose has reported in the Jewish Chronicle that British universities have been undertaking research in collaboration with Iranian researchers and universities into areas of potential military applications, including drone technology, fighter jets, battlefield armour, and laser communication. Will the Prime Minister initiate an investigation into this and take action to stop the failure of our sanctions regime before it does any more harm to the national interest of the United Kingdom and our allies?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for raising this important topic. We take all allegations of breaches of export control seriously, and my understanding is that officials in the Department for Business and Trade are currently now investigating the allegations made in the recent press articles cited. We will not accept collaborations which compromise our national security, and that's why we've made our systems more robust, including expanding the scope of the Academic Technology Approval Scheme to protect UK research from ever-changing global threats. But my right honourable friend is absolutely right to highlight this, and he has my assurance we will keep on it.
Now, you may have noticed that I'm wearing a stripy tie today. Now, I do wear this tie on other occasions, but this time it's not just a sartorial choice. It's in sympathy with the people who suffer from SYNGAP1. Today is SYNGAP1 Day. SYNGAP1 is a disease of children that is caused by a genetic flaw, often just a single genetic flaw, which stops their body making half the proteins that are needed to control the nervous system. And children who suffer from this, and I have a grandchild who suffers from it, called Chloe. A picture will be on the screen in a moment. Children who suffer from this have very, very serious learning disabilities. In essence, what happens is they have tiny epileptic fits, sometimes a dozen times a day, and sometimes big epileptic fits. And each time that happens, it's a bit like pressing the reset button on a computer, and they forget everything they've learned. So for them to remember words and remember language and be able to articulate is pretty much impossible. It also causes some physical problems in coordination and so on. And we've got research carrying out. I've raised some hundreds of thousands of pounds for this research. I think about £400,000 for the research. And today we're raising money as well for one other aspect of the charity to help children in this situation, and hopefully to develop a gene therapy at some point. There are links in the text below for you to give and help if you want to. Everything will be very gratefully received. When we started this series, we were a little bit ahead of the game talking about artificial intelligence. Not everybody was talking about AI at the time. But since we did that, it seems to have come up every week. And the same is true this week. So forgive me if it gets a bit repetitive. You've heard all the fretting about AI becoming something out of Terminator or Terminator 2 or whatever. But we shouldn't forget as well that there are a lot of very, very productive uses of AI. And one in particular has come to my attention this week. It's using AI along with a whole lot of sensors in the ground and in the rivers and satellite photographs and so on to predict levels of pollution in our rivers. That's a really topical issue. And do it in such a way that we can, for example, say to farmers, please don't put the fertilizer on the field this week because that will make the river worse and carry it above a certain threshold and so on. Now, this AI is more than 90% successful in its prediction. So it's a good demonstration, in my view, of using AI in a safe way, as it were, within the guardrails, in a way which it can't do harm. It can make mistakes, of course, we all can, but it can't do active harm. And it seems to me a very, very good example of why we need to have balance in the way we approach the whole issue of artificial intelligence. That's it for this week. Thank you for watching again. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already, tell your friends about it, and read some of the links below. You'll see some interesting links to various aspects of what we talked about today.